and welcome to the latest Gramophone podcast. I'm Martin Cullingford, editor of Gramophone, and today I'm delighted to be joined by the saxophonist Amy Dickson. Amy, hello.
Hello.
Now we're here to talk about your new recording on Sony Classical, a fascinating and beautiful exploration of folk music influenced works from all around the world, from Scotland to Australia, all of which brilliantly highlight the eloquent sound world of the saxophone, and as we shall come on to discuss, some other instruments too. But let's set the scene. Before we go on to explore some of the pieces in more depth, first tell me about your vision behind this album.
The album really came into being because of the amazing, stunning saxophone concerto that Sir James Macmillan very kindly wrote for me, which was premiered last year with the Scottish Chamber Orchestra on a tour that we gave, and I've recorded it for this album. It was a live recording with the Adelaide Symphony Orchestra, who are also one of the commissioning orchestras. And it is a really wonderful addition to the saxophone repertoire. It's immediately listenable and accessible to most audiences, I would think, but it also has so many interesting harmonies, as his music does, and so much to think about. And so it's based around folk music of Scotland. The first movement is a series of Scottish dances, a march, a strathspey and a reel. The second is a Gaelic psalm and influenced by the music of the Free Presbyterian Church in the Highlands and the Western Isles. And then the third movement is a jig. And so I felt so passionate about that piece when I toured it, and I just really wanted to continue an exploration of that theme, the influence, however subtle it may be, of folk or traditional music, or even just music that's local to the local music of a country to any composer. And I always find it particularly interesting when I go to play in different countries, especially as a soloist, because if I'm playing the music of that country with an orchestra, they always, they play it in just such an instinctive way. There's something that lifts it. When I play the John Williams concerto or Philip Glass, I've just been playing that last week, in America, the orchestras just play it in a different way than anywhere else. When I play in Australia and I play Peter Sculthorpe or Ross Edwards, as an Australian-born person, I grew up, and so did all other Australians really, with that music, and their music has absorbed the sounds of Australia, and so there's something in the blood that is different in that country, and I find that whole concept fascinating. So I think that's kind of where this album really stemmed from.
It's fascinating because throughout all of this album, almost just a simple turn of phrase, whether it's Manuel de Falla or Peter Sculthorpe or James Macmillan, there's a sense of almost just a little turn of phrase can evoke a time and a place really quite extraordinarily.
Yes, it's amazing how the smallest inflection can instantly put you in a place. And so it was great fun to make the album as well, because it really, there was a huge scope for different types of pieces and instrumentation as well. Both Peter Sculthorpe and Ross Edwards do quote from the sounds of the Australian, the bush and the bird songs. With Peter Sculthorpe's music, he was able to use some indigenous pieces, and he was given permission to do that. He actually used the piece the theme that we've recorded here is called Jalili, and he used that in a number of his works, including the saxophone concerto Island Songs, which he wrote for me shortly before he sadly passed away a few years ago. And I'll never forget, I went round to his house when he was writing the concerto, and Jalili is such a well-known melody in Australia. Every classical musician can, sing it to you instantly. And he said to me, actually, it should be played like the way that an Indigenous Australian person would speak. So not in a particularly lyrical way. And it's just a very simple melody. It goes da 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 dum, da 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 dum. And he said it shouldn't be, operatic. It shouldn't have a lot of direction to it, which a lot of us do. Instead, it should be really flat. Yada da 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 dum, yada da da dum. And that's the way they speak.
That's interesting.
And
that now informs the way that you play it.
Completely, yeah. And of course, there's very little that he can do to instruct the performer when he's on the score.
Sometimes that connection to a composer who can just tell you something that would otherwise be lost, and it's something you can pass on to people through your performance.
Yeah.
And obviously, Ross Edwards, one of the things they do also draw on is a very Australian sound, the sound of the didgeridoo, which William Barton very specifically draws on because he's a performer and a composer, and also features on this disc. Talk to me about collaborating with didgeridoo.
William's been a friend for many, many years, and he's a wonderful musician. And I've always wanted to record something with him, and all the stars aligned at the right moment for this. And he came into the studio one night, and we just improvised. Ross Edwards actually came to the recording and was wonderful, and gave us quite specific instruction, and really thought very much about how we could change his pre-existing work, Yanada, to become a duo piece, and that was so inspirational. It was amazing. William also knew Peter Sculthorpe very well and had worked with him a number of times.
So he performed in his Requiem, didn't he? And I think that was where we probably first were very aware of him.
Right, yes. And so he knew, what Peter's way of thinking about music, and so that was really great. And then we recorded one of William's own tribal pieces. So William has been given permission by his tribe to record one of their songs, and it's called Kalkadunga.
Right.
And just to do that in itself is quite unusual, so it's a huge privilege for me to have this on my album. And he came into the studio, and and we were just improvising. It was late one night, and he said, right, what I think we should do is I'm going to sing the melody and you play a drone note, and then at the end I'm just going to kind of cut you off with a hand signal, and then I'm going to play the drone note on the didgeridoo and you can play the melody. And that was the basic, that, and then we improvised around that. And so we started, and I've never timed myself circular breathing before, so I didn't know what was going to happen. But anyway, about 10 minutes later, William finally gave me the hand signal, and I hadn't noticed. And I mean, I knew that I was getting slightly tired, but it was fine. But the fascinating thing was that how much you can do with one note expressively, because all I had at my disposal were dynamic differences and vibrato. And actually, I found that I could really converse with him, with his, comment on his phrasing and everything while he was singing, by just altering my dynamics and vibrato. And I found that really interesting.
And is this is it a similar thing to how a didgeridoo is played? Is circular breathing and the drone note, the expressiveness can be brought into? Is that?
Yeah, well, I mean, on the drone, a didgeridoo can be very, very expressive because they can create all sorts of different sounds, and he mimics kookaburras and all sorts of bird sounds, and it's great. But I actually taught myself to circular breathe by watching videos of didgeridoo players.
So it must be interesting for it all to come.
Yeah, full circle. And it is something about the oldest, or probably one of the oldest instruments in the world, and one of the newest instruments in the world, and that's quite a nice alignment, I think.
One track on the album I particularly enjoyed was Shepherd's Hay, which is a Percy Granger setting of a Morris dancing tune. But actually, there was also something very fascinating about the way you recorded this. So tell me about that.
Well, it's a little bit of fun, but I'm glad you like it.
I like it very much.
It's well, Percy Granger was obviously, he was Australian. He played the saxophone, and he came over here, so we have things in common. And I thought it'd be fun to just have lots of me. So I think there are 2 soprano lines and then a few alto lines, all overdubbed. And
so 5 lines in total.
I think
5
so.
parts,
Yeah, and it's completely crazy and manic and entirely nuts, but hopefully it'll make people smile.
I know, it's absolutely wonderful. So just a reminder that Amy Dickson's album In Circles is available from Sony Classical. Amy, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much.
If you've enjoyed this Gramophone podcast, you can find many more episodes by searching for Gramophone Magazine in your podcast application of choice. And just a reminder that all listeners to this podcast can get a 20% discount off any of our magazine subscription packages by going to gramophone.co.uk/subscribe and entering promotional code podcast20 at the checkout. Thank you for listening.